So, Craig, Donald Trump was back in Wisconsin for the first time since his inaugural this week. He brought this executive order along to sign with him, but he could have done that anyway. Why come back to Wisconsin? What was it about the politics here?
Yeah, I mean, the backdrop to this trip is pretty interesting. Wisconsin was obviously one of the key Democratic-leaning states that he picked up that allowed him to win the Electoral College. So it's natural for a president to want to come back and work that turf that he knows he's going to need again if he runs for re-election 3 years from now. It's also the home district of the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and the home district of his White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. So it made sense. It's also a good place, I think, to kind of push the issues that he was pushing when he was back here, this sort of economic nationalist, populist message that he hit so hard during the campaign, but that he had seemed to be drifting away from in his presidency. Right.
A couple of flip-flops recently on the Export-Import Bank on whether China is a currency manipulator. So might be a way to firm up the opinions, at least, of his supporters.
Yeah. I mean, and there were two kind of interesting things that stood out about this visit to me. One was, the talk about trade and about blue-collar jobs and manufacturing was expected, but then he waded into this complicated dairy fight between Canada and Wisconsin, very much on the side of American milk producers. That was interesting. And the other interesting thing was that he, in an interview with TMJ Television, separate from the event, he basically endorsed Tammy Baldwin's Buy American provision, which was something she's been working on for a long time. It basically would require American supplies and products to be used in certain water infrastructure projects. But here, Tammy Baldwin is basically the Republican Party's #1 political target in Wisconsin next year. And he endorsed one of her signature issues. And it's also an issue where, like some other issues, there's some distance between Republican President Trump and the Republican Congress. There are a lot of Republicans in Congress who aren't too crazy about these Buy American provisions.
Mm-hmm. And what about the order itself? Just how much impact is that likely to have, or is it really more political theater?
I think it's more symbolic and rhetorical than anything else. I mean, the order itself is very limited in its concrete scope. It talks about reviewing policies and restrictions, and it's very limited in its concrete effects. But it does harken back to what we think of as Donald Trump's sort of signature campaign themes.
And you mentioned Tammy Baldwin. You wrote recently that her political prospects for 2018 for her re-election bid look a little bit better. Why is that?
Well, I mean, her numbers are slightly better than they have been in the past, but the main reason is that had Hillary Clinton been elected president, it is almost always a big burden for members of the president's party in the midterm elections. It's just there's so much, the political forces are always working against the party in the White House. Almost invariably, the party that occupies the White House loses seats. And so you would have had basically a third Democratic term in the White House, and Tammy Baldwin kind of working in a midterm election where the turnout trends are typically against Democrats to begin with. All the arrows would have been pointing against her. But now there's the possibility of a much better midterm cycle for Democrats, and that could overcome, some of her vulnerabilities. She's going to be the #1 target for Republicans in Wisconsin, but she could have the wind at her back instead of in her face as a result of Trump's victory over her candidate for president, Hillary Clinton.
All right, Craig Gilbert in Washington. Thanks so much.